That's it for this edition of Uptown Radio. We hope you enjoyed the show. Our executive producer today was Thomas Copeland. Leading our staff of reporters was senior producer Elizabeth Erb. Director Tricia Stortz coordinated our studio production team. Our producer, Henrietta McFarlane, led our copy team and assisted in the studio. Izepa Macias delivered our local newscast, and day reporters V. Tran and Valentina Zarens-Martinez brought you the latest on the ground in New York. Our instructors, Sally Herships, Robert Smith, and Lydia McMullen-Laird, advised our staff. I'm Isabel Tier. Uptown Radio is live Thursdays at 4. Until next time, you can always find us. Why did I say catch us? Until next time, you can always find us at uptownradio.org. From all of us here at Uptown Radio, thanks for listening.
Hey, Trisha. Will you remember to turn off my mic after my newscast so that I can leave the room? Thank you. I feel concerned about it. I don't know why. Spring is officially in the air as temperatures rise in the city. Showers are in the forecast. 46-year-old Tiffany Thomas. After 46-year-old Tiffany Thomas won first place in the goal of the bill is for the program to better understand the challenges of enrollment by gathering
You're listening to Uptown Radio. It's Thursday, March 23rd. I'm Isabel Tier. There's still no word from the grand jury on Donald Trump's highly anticipated indictment. And there are more journalists than protesters down at the courthouse. Are the media being manipulated?
We don't know what's happening. We're just basically following on what Donald Trump has said.
And mental health organizations in New York City want people who have experienced mental illness to be the first on call in crisis, not the police.
Because who better to de-escalate someone in crisis than someone who has gone through it themselves?
A museum of failure has arrived in New York City, showcasing products that flopped.
Everything from Crystal Pepsi, New Coke, to lobotomy tools, a golf club that you use as a urinal.
And the musical Bad Cinderella, which failed on the West End, is giving Broadway a shot. All this and more on Uptown Radio. But first, the news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Janine Herbst. The CEO of video sharing app TikTok faced a fierce grilling in Congress as lawmakers from both parties on the House Energy and Commerce Committee questioned the company's ties to China and claimed the app has a harmful effect on children. As NPR's Bobby Allen reports, Shou Chen claims there's a buffer in place to protect Americans' data.
Shou Chu said that there is a firewall in place, a firewall that is getting stronger under a plan that they are now unfolding that would prevent their employees in Beijing from having any access to user data or influencing what Americans see. And it would prevent the Chinese Communist Party from ever accessing U.S. user data.
NPR's Bobby Allen. The federal government and several states have banned the use of TikTok on government devices. Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg is publicly defending his grand jury inquiry into former President Donald Trump's against suggestions by Republicans in Congress that is politically motivated. NPR's Ilya Meritz has more.
In a letter to District Attorney Bragg, House Judiciary Chairman Representative Jim Jordan accused the DA of an unprecedented abuse of prosecutorial authority. He demanded documents relating to the investigation of Trump, which may result in the former president being indicted. In his response letter, Bragg says complying with Jordan's document request could harm an active investigation and would infringe on New York's sovereignty as a state. Instead, Bragg suggests a meeting with the House Judiciary Committee to help him determine whether Congress has any legitimate legislative purpose in probing his investigation of Trump. Ilya Meritz, NPR News, New York.
The House Foreign Affairs Committee chairman is threatening to issue a subpoena for a State Department document about the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. NPR's Michelle Kellerman reports Secretary of State Antony Blinken is facing some tough questions about that.
Republican Michael McCaul says Americans should be able to see some of the concerns embassy officials were raising as the U.S. withdrew from Afghanistan. And he's telling Secretary Blinken that he will subpoena for that so-called dissent cable if necessary. Blinken says this is supposed to be a confidential channel for State Department employees to express dissent.
It is vital to me that we preserve the integrity of that process and of that channel, that we not take any steps that could have a chilling effect on the willingness of others to come forward in the future.
He says he's considering ways to share the substance of the cable to the committee. Michelle Kellerman, NPR News, the State Department.
On Wall Street, a volatile trading session today as stocks moved from positive to negative territory, ending in the positive. Dow up 73 points, the Nasdaq up 117, the S&P 500 up 11. This is NPR News.
From Columbia Radio News in New York, I'm Izapa Macias. Governor Hochul has announced several new bills, the first intended to help shut down illegal pot shops in the city. According to the new legislation, New Yorkers found with illicit plants and products would face fines up to $200,000. Businesses selling cannabis without a license would be fined $10,000 a day. In a press release, Hochul said she's proud of the city's progress supporting its legal cannabis industry. The other new initiative will help those applying for a supplemental nutrition program for women, infants, and children, or WIC. She said the goal of the bill is for the program to better understand enrollment challenges by gathering new client feedback. A transgender cyclist who sparked backlash after winning a New York cycling competition has spoken out on Instagram. after 46-year-old Tiffany Thomas won first place in the crit cycling race on Randall's Island. Other amateur cyclists spoke out, saying it was painful to, quote, watch a man finish before them after training for years. Some even quit. Thomas addressed critics today in a post that read, "Transgender people are humans and deserve respect." After months of searching and considering over 900 applications, Mayor Adams is preparing to announce the city's newly appointed rat czar. The new director of rodent mitigation will lead a campaign to steal back real estate from what is arguably New York City's least favorite resident. Targeted city cleanups, revised trash pickup times, and rat battles are on the new czar's agenda. Spring is officially in the air as temperatures rise in the city, but make sure you keep your umbrella close as showers are in the forecast. March Madness continues tonight at Madison Square Garden. You can catch the Michigan State versus Kansas State game at 6:30 p.m. Izapa Macias, Columbia Radio News.
Welcome back. This is Uptown Radio. I'm Isabel Tier. Today is the last day of this week that the grand jury on the case against Donald Trump could come out with an indictment. The former president has been accused of using campaign funds as hush money, and Trump himself teased that he would be arrested and called for his supporters to protest the move. But at the courthouse where the grand jury is deliberating in Lower Manhattan today, Columbia Radio News reporter V. Tran reports she saw mostly media and police, and no protesters.
Even though Trump himself alluded to a big protest at the courthouse this week, I had to search for a while to find a Trump supporter and ended up talking to Matthew Hughes at the park across the street from the courthouse. Hughes thinks that more protesters will come out to support Trump if the grand jury indicts him.
I think it's just so too early with the grand jury making their indictment decision, so I really think that more supporters will come out later on down the road when this is getting more further into the situation.
I also asked Hughes if he thinks an indictment would impact Trump's bid for the presidency in 2024.
I don't think it's going to affect him. I think it's going to be more helpful to his campaign. I think a lot more people will come out and support him if this indictment doesn't go.
Eric Ham, a White House correspondent for the Associated Press and a political analyst for BBC and Canadian television, agrees that the indictment might benefit Trump politically.
He's still the front runner of the Republican Party for its nomination, and he is going to use this as the baseline for how the left, how Democrats, and how institutions are attempting to try to thwart his efforts to get back to the White House.
In the meantime, before the grand jury makes its decision, Trump is capitalizing on the situation to get more media coverage. Ham says the media is being played by Donald Trump.
How Donald Trump, through his media savvy, has now taken control of this entire process.
Since the grand jury proceedings aren't open to the public, Ham thinks it makes the media more susceptible to Trump's unreliable account of the situation.
And again, we're talking about someone who has always played fast and loose with the truth, but yet we're hanging on to his every word as if like we're waiting for the next Marvel movie to come out.
The grand jury will reconvene next Monday, and it will continue to meet until a decision is made. Vitran, Columbia Radio News.
This week, a coalition of mental health organizations rallied at City Hall. The group is calling on New York to remove police as first responders to mental health crisis calls and increase funding for an alternative system. Tricia Stortz reports.
Everyone knows the numbers 911. If you call it, you get the police, whether the police are the best responders or not. On Tuesday morning, a small group of mental health advocates carried signs and chanted outside of City Hall. They called on city officials to send EMTs, social workers, and peers instead of police.
Here's not police! Here's not police! Here's not police!
Felix Guzman was at the rally. He's a certified peer, someone living with a mental illness who has also been trained in basic forms of crisis response.
We need to remove police as principal responders entirely and leave peers to be the focal point, because who better to de-escalate someone in crisis than someone who has gone through it themselves?
Police are trained to stop violent offenders and use lethal force if necessary, but in a mental health crisis, they can actually make things worse. Solomon Acevedo is the city's Deputy Public Advocate of Justice, Health Equity, and Safety.
We know that encountering police is something that is extremely triggering for folks who have serious mental illness and usually ends in a physical confrontation and not the health care that people deserve to be connected to.
The organizations leading the charge want to emphasize that there are already systems in place to take care of people in crisis. There's a pilot program called Be Heard. It was launched by the Mayor's Office of Community Mental Health during the pandemic. Be Heard sends EMTs and social workers as alternative mental health crisis first responders. But Acevedo says that when people call 911,
although calls are being routed in New York City to the Be Heard project, the people who are answering the phones are still defaulting to police 82% of the time, according to the city.
This is why advocates are pushing the city to expand an alternative to 911. It's another phone number, 988.
You've reached the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. We are here to help.
There are numbers to push if you're LGBTQ, another number for veterans in crisis. Eventually, if you stay on the line, you might be routed to Be Heard. But it can be confusing. Dr. Dave Chokshi, former commissioner of the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, says, sure, it's nice to have lots of resources.
But sometimes that results in complexity that makes it very difficult for someone to figure out what is actually going to help them in a time of need. So I do think that this is a primary role of government to do that knitting together and to make it seamless so that there's one number, for example, for people to call.
Dr. Chokshi also says that it isn't feasible to eliminate the role of law enforcement entirely, but he agrees with the need to invest in peers.
There's very likely a ready partnership for something like that to continue to be expanded upon. But the devil is often in the details. We can't have a roving team of 16 people, even if all of the 16 will have specific assets that they're able to offer.
The city has increased the budget for 988 from $35 million to $65 million in the upcoming fiscal year. But advocates say even with more funding, these programs can't remain pilot projects. They have to be incorporated into the city's main healthcare system so that all mental health crisis calls receive a medical response. Tricia Stortz, Columbia Radio News.
Tonight, the Andrew Lloyd Webber musical Bad Cinderella opens on Broadway. It's an unconventional fairy tale, loosely adapted from the classic story. The producers are hoping that the exploration of gender and beauty standards will bring in big audiences. But the show is plagued by the controversial way it closed in London's West End. Valentina Zarens-Martinez reports from Times Square.
Bad Cinderella opens on 45th Street tonight, and it's easy to see from the outside how it's different from the children's story. The posters surrounding the Majestic Theater call it the baddest show on Broadway. And even the cast looks different than the Disney version. Cinderella is Latina, and the writing on the show is in fake graffiti. The show has been on previews for a month, and last night I caught a member of the audience during intermission. Kimberly White lives 2 blocks away and got last-minute tickets.
The show had tons of drama around it in the London production, and so that's like... I'm half here to see what the hell that drama was about. I'm very excited to see kind of... So, yeah, I think the drama there, plus the low reviews, plus TikTok, put a fair bit of doubt in my mind in terms of expectations. Normally I go in completely blind. I'm slightly less than blind on this one, but I still have no clue where we're going. So I'm still having a great time.
The show closed unexpectedly after a short run in the West End of London. It got some bad reviews and wasn't making enough money. But the real scandal was that most of the production members got fired without notice. They found out on social media. Andrew Lloyd Webber, the man who composed the music and one of the main producers, called it a costly mistake. The musical was revamped and restaged here in New York. And they're hoping the run goes better than London. After last night's preview, it seems like the producers fixed some problems.
No, I loved it.
loved
I
it?
loved the plot twist. I was going to leave halfway through, and then I was like, "Whoa, maybe I'll stay."
Gabriela Not is also a fan.
The actors were amazing. Prince Charming especially was very charming. But both of the boys were very good, very talented.
But on TikTok and social media, people are already trashing the show. They say the lyrics are too simple and that it seems stuck in the past. Even the show's use of gay and Latina themes seem a bit performative. We'll know tomorrow how the critics liked it. So far the previews have not sold out, and this might not be the big hit that Andrew Lloyd Webber is banking on. Valentina Sáenz Martínez, Columbia Radio News.
Failure is a part of life, a part we usually want to forget. But a new museum encourages us to think differently. The Museum of Failure is open this week in New York City. It chronicles some of the epic failures of the world's best-known companies, like frozen beef lasagna made by the toothpaste giant Colgate. I sat down with Dr. Samuel West, the founder and curator of the Museum of Failure, to talk about the role failure plays in innovation. Dr. West, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
What sparked the desire to create a Museum of Failure?
I started the museum in Sweden back in 2017, and it was a mix of reasons why I started. One was that I was sick and tired of the shiny, happy success stories of this is what, successful innovation or a successful business person or entrepreneur is like. And what these stories failed to convey is the reality that behind most of the products and services we take for granted, there are hundreds of failed iterations, failed projects upon which these successes are built. So I thought with the Museum of Failure, I wanted to highlight that, the world is full of failure as well, and let those stories also get some attention.
So tell us a little bit about some of those failures. What can visitors to the Museum of Failure expect to see?
We have a wide range of products and services. I mean, everything from food items like Crystal Pepsi, New Coke, to medical items. We have lobotomy tools. We have silly items, a golf club that you use as a urinal.
A golf club used as a urinal?
It's called the Euro Club with a U. That's one of the silly items we have.
Have you changed anything specific about the museum now that it's come to New York? Are there any New York-specific failures?
The museum is constantly growing, so we get donations regularly. So one donation received yesterday is from a person in New York who donated a Cabbage Patch doll called Snack Time. It's a doll that you feed the doll some plastic food items, and it has a mechanism that chews that food and ends up in a backpack. The problem with this doll was it also liked to chew on children's fingers and hair. It was a dangerous doll. So that one was donated yesterday, and we put it into the museum.
So that item was actually recalled due to safety reasons?
Yes, definitely. There was a big recall on that doll. I think it's funny, but it's not safe.
If you were given your own spot in the museum, what failure would you put on display?
I have a failure that's related to the museum that is embarrassing. So I'm a museum curator. So you'd think that I can spell the word museum. But when I got the idea for Museum of Failure, I was so excited, and I thought it was such a great idea, that I immediately bought the domain museumoffailure.com. I was all happy about it. It was still available, right? Until I got an email confirming I bought it, and it says, you're now the happy owner of museumoffailure.com. So I can't even spell the word museum. That would probably be the text associated with me at the museum.
Oh, that's a great story. Do you have that displayed anywhere on the website?
No, I'm embarrassed.
One of the funniest failures that I saw was the spray-on condom, which failed with consumers, from my understanding, because it took 3 minutes for the latex to dry. And so by the time the condom was ready, the condom user was not. Are failures like these better forgotten? What can we learn from embarrassing failures like that?
I mean, it's a funny item, and it's a silly concept. But I think the serious takeaway message is that we need those kind of experiments to test the boundaries. Who knows? Maybe a spray-on condom was a great idea. Somebody has to try it out. And we shouldn't stigmatize the failure when people are trying new things. Why do we praise success and progress so much, and then we penalize failure? They're both part of the same coin. But the spray-on condoms were stupid. You're right.
This is Dr. Samuel West, the founder and curator of the Museum of Failure, which is open in New York City until May. Dr. West, thank you so much for coming in and talking with us here at Uptown Radio.
Thanks a lot. It was a good chat.
Older people can get Botox to smooth out their wrinkles. But there's a new wave of wrinkle warriors. Younger people are taking preventative measures to make sure wrinkles never form in the first place. In fact, the stats are in, and Botox injections for under 30s are at an all-time high. As Henrietta McFarlane reports from New York City, getting Botox isn't usually a one-off. Once you start young, you're unlikely to stop.
29-year-old Andrea Cara works as a marketing manager for a fertility clinic. She's been getting Botox for a few years now. She pays over $300 per session. For her, the price is worth it. She's never felt better about her looks. I head over to her studio apartment in Brooklyn. In Cara's living room, photos of her friends and family line the walls. She tells me she thinks her mum has aged really well, but that Botox wasn't readily available for her generation. It is now, and she's using it to enhance her looks. Can you show me in the mirror?
I choose to go in the V shape, and it's a few very, very small injections, sort of going in a diagonal from the bridge of my nose up towards my hairline. And what it does is it just freezes those muscles so that I'm not able to raise my eyebrows and create those creases. And an added benefit that I didn't know about is it also gives my brow a little bit of an arch that it would not be able to achieve naturally.
Like so many others under 30, Cara gets Botox to prevent future wrinkles.
I was 27. I had a wrinkle in my forehead that drove me a little crazy, but I used to be able to kind of smooth out or moisturize away. I don't necessarily think I look old. I don't think I am aging.
Cara says she's not afraid to age. She just doesn't like the way wrinkles look on her face.
I mean, I don't think anyone needs to get their hair highlighted or needs to get their eyebrows done. But for me, Botox has just become one of those things to help me put my best self forward.
What was it like the first time you got it? How did it feel?
3 days immediately afterwards, I was just sort of texting my friends who had already had it. I was like constantly staring at my face, like, when is it going to kick in? What am I going to notice? Like, what's happening? And very gradually, I started losing the ability to like raise my eyebrows. And then like 7 to 14 days later, I looked in the mirror and was like, oh my God, this is the best my face has ever looked.
All thanks to her Botox injections. They block chemical signals that cause your muscles to contract. The toxin also causes life-threatening food poisoning. But don't worry, there aren't too many widely cited physical risks of Botox, especially when compared to other surgical procedures. It paralyzes your muscles in your face, stopping wrinkles from forming. And if you're young and as long as you keep up with appointments every 3 to 6 months, the idea is that over time you'd need fewer injections. The number of people under 30 getting Botox has tripled since last year. Aesthetic nurse Carrie Lowe has seen this firsthand. She's been getting Botox since she was 23. She now works at a dermatology clinic on the Upper East Side. At the end of a busy Thursday, she's run off her feet helping people get their injections. By the end of the day, she was slumped on her couch in her apartment and spoke to me via Zoom. Lowe says people might start with just an injection in the cheekbone and then spiral towards more.
And then they're like, oh, well, I'm already doing it here, you know, it's not creating any issues there. Let me try and go for forehead and between the brows.
A study was released this year by the American Academy of Facial Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery. Nearly 80% of clinicians say earlier age prevention and maintenance measures could lead to more Botox and addiction down the line. Dana Berkowitz, a professor of sociology and women's studies, writes about this in her book Botox: A Nation, Changing the Face of America. She calls it a gateway drug into other procedures, creating a psychological addiction.
When you start using Botox, for the most part, you don't stop.
Berkowitz is worried that ageless faces create impossible beauty standards of no wrinkles.
You become very much accustomed to seeing your face look a certain way. What that means is that if you are starting early, like in your early 20s, you're signing up to be a lifetime consumer. And oftentimes you may start with neurotoxin and then you may graduate to dermal filler and to other cosmetic procedures.
And some people say they go too far and stop looking like themselves. Love Island's Faye Winter spoke out about her Botox regrets and obsession this year.
Stress gives me wrinkles. Wrinkles means I have to get more Botox, and Botox potentially means that my face will drop.
Back at Kara's apartment, she tells me she doesn't think too much about the future.
Who knows? For now, it's something that is just sort of a part of my routine twice a year. Again, like getting a haircut or a hair highlight or anything like that. But that's a judgment call I think I'll make later on.
Kara had her last appointment on Tuesday and says she'll schedule in for another in September or October. Henrietta McFarlane, Columbia Radio News.
That's it for this edition of Uptown Radio. We hope you enjoyed the show. Our executive producer today was Thomas Copeland. Leading our staff of reporters was senior producer Elizabeth Erb. Director Tricia Stortz coordinated our studio production team. Our producer, Henrietta McFarlane, led our copy team and assisted in the studio. Izepa Macias delivered our local newscast, and day reporters V. Tran and Valentina Zarens-Martinez brought you the latest on the ground in New York. Our instructors, Sally Herships, Robert Smith, and Lydia McMullen-Laird advised our staff. I'm Isabel Tier. Uptown Radio is live Thursdays at 4. Until next time, you can always find us at uptownradio.org. From all of us here at Uptown Radio, thanks for listening.